Okay. Welcome, everybody. Are we ready? Mike? Okay. Well, even without Leanne, I'm going to call the meeting of, that's last February, that's February 5th. Today's the 23rd, right? 23rd.
Wait a minute.
We got the February agenda up there. I think we're in the wrong day. But anyway, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome all. Hey, Jack, you want to introduce yourself starting there?
Jack Warner, citizen volunteer.
Paul?
Paul Dumas, volunteer.
Mike?
Michael Koner, committee member.
George Elmore, committee member. Bill Moore, committee member.
Rick Miller, committee member.
Leanne Evans, treasurer.
Mike Burke, CFO.
Claire Littlejohn from the General Counsel's office.
If I can, I want to go through online. I'm showing the Google Meet right now. So online, there's a lot of people joining by the phone. I don't know who they are, but we have Ms. McQuinn, our board members here.
Hello, Barbara.
Good morning. Chris is is from the 10 TV station. Laretha McIntyre is from my team. Mark Murray is running all the sound and everything for us today. Raymond Marshall's also working on sound. Rick Patterson, and gosh, this is going to be fun. Raymond James. Ron Horan is from my team. Scott Sweeten is from PFM. Steve Alexander is from PFM. Tommy Munn. I don't know who
I'm from Wells Fargo, in lieu of John Generali.
Okay, hello, how are you?
Good morning.
Okay, so that's all the people online. There are a lot of people calling in from the phone. So for those of you that are attending by phone, if you could send me an email later today, I will add you all into the minutes. And I'm just adding some more people. It just came on.
Hey, Leanne, this is David. I'm on the phone now, but I'm also waiting on the Google Meets. I haven't been admitted yet.
Okay, I have been admitting everything as it comes up, so I just admitted several.
Well, welcome those who have been admitted.
Okay, and Teresa Michaels
Those
is
who are
here from
waiting.
our Inspector General's office. Oh, hi, how are you? I didn't look back behind me, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm adding more people in, so I'm just going to stay on this screen for just a minute, just to make sure we let everybody in, especially if David's on the phone and hasn't gotten in yet. They're popping in slowly. So Anna from City has joined.
Morning, Leanne.
Good morning.
Hey, Leanne, I'm
Yes.
going to pop out and pop back in because right now, at least, it's saying I can't join because I wasn't accepted. So I think I
Oh.
timed out. So I'll
Okay.
pop right back in.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, we're going to stay
Is
on
that
this
the
for just a minute.
technology? Is that the problem?
It's just taking a minute to let them into the screen, and I have to let them in. And once I switch the other screen, I won't see that they're trying to get in. I'll give it just another minute for them to pop back in. In the meantime, I really do want to thank all of you for coming in. We've had some challenges with some of our committees getting a quorum, and you all were here in February and now again today. So
We're delighted to see each other, frankly,
Yeah, that's right.
you know, and to see others. I think, I'm speaking for you all, but I surely am.
Okay, I saw David come up and Tom Kai come up. Okay. David, are you on?
Yes, I'm on now.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the agenda. And I'll flip back to the Google Meets a couple of times just to make sure that we're not missing anybody.
So
The agenda, we've got the approval of the minutes, the quarterly reports, and a proposed refunding. This is the wrong agenda. This is the last meeting.
If I'm not mistaken, go up to the top of it. It's got the wrong date.
The topics, except it's
right.
the minutes are right. What's on the agenda, and I apologize, I've opened the wrong one. And I can open another version, but then you won't be able to see it up on the screen, and I'll lose them. The items on the agenda are the quarterly reports, and there's a proposed refunding of the 2012 COPS issue.
Okay, so the first item is the quarterly reports?
Yes.
Okay, Steve Alexander?
Steve Alexander, do you want to go
You're on,
ahead
all
and
right.
start? I'm going to check. Yep, nobody else is here, so I'll pull up your market update. And can you see that?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are ready to go.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Alexander, and I'm also joined with my colleague Scott Sweeten. We're going to go over a few of the key points for the quarter and kind of where we are today. And as we all know, this sort of marks a year now from the first quarter of 2020, as we've now completed the first quarter of 21. So that's the good news, is that we've gotten through this whole year with COVID-19. As you can see on the slide here, and this is information that obviously is changing on a daily basis, but overall the reported cases continue to decline and the vaccines administered continue to increase. So I think we hit a very big milestone here recently with over 200,000 Americans having either one or two shots of the vaccine. So 200 million. So that is an important milestone. As we said really in the beginning of all this, we said that the recovery of the economy was really dependent on the vaccines and when they would be administered, when they would roll out, how many people would take it. And so as we see the economy improving, we are seeing more and more folks receiving the vaccine. So there's a pretty good correlation between COVID-19 vaccinations and the improvement on the economy. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see some major numbers. And of course, the unemployment number has really dropped dramatically from where we were the first quarter or so of last year. Things have greatly improved on the employment standpoint as we see more individuals returning back to work. There's quite a demand for restaurant workers, hospitality. The cruise lines will hopefully be starting later on this year. So there's a number of activities that are improving. Many of our major airports are starting to see more activity than they have in the past. In fact, in one of the other charts, we do have a sort of a TSA report and kind of see that the activity is increasing. So we've made some great strides from where we were this very same time period last year when we met and we talked about the economy. So if you go to the next slide, this is kind of a good indication here. You can see the contrast of both the manufacturing and non-manufacturing numbers, with getting a lot of feedback here.
We have to mute some phones, possibly.
Yeah, some folks could
We don't hear it
put your
here.
phones in. Okay. All right, so as
But we hear it if we're online, so if everyone could mute except presenter, that would be helpful.
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, we have
It's
to
coming from Mark Murray.
Yes, it is.
Well, that's probably the whole room. So 'cause
Oh,
we don't
okay,
have any
okay.
computers up today. So we did that to
Okay.
try to help. So if it's coming from Mark is running the sound system for the whole room.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'll just keep pressing on and hopefully everybody can hear the best we can. So this is the a really good piece of news here, as far as you can see where we were in 2020 a year ago, how both the manufacturing and non-manufacturing numbers were below that magical line. Anything above the 50 index mark represents contraction. Anything above the 50 represents expansion. And you can see how both of those, especially in recent months here, have really moved up dramatically. And if you were to overlay the vaccines and the number of vaccines administered, you would see how they would correlate nicely. And that's something we've been talking about pretty much the whole year, that the economy improvement would be based on the vaccines and how many Americans would be taking those vaccines. Of course, this is a worldwide situation. So if you look around the world, we still have some very concerning parts of the world that are way behind in the number of vaccines. So that's still going to put a damper on the global economy. But from a domestic situation, you'll see the improvements here. And Lee, if you go to the next slide. So this is what it all kind of looks like, and what really affects what Leanne has to do with her short-term money for the school district and what we're doing with the long-term part of the portfolio. You'll see here, this is the Treasury yield curve from 3 months to 30 years. We've plotted December of 2020, February of 21, and then April of 21 as well. You can see how the curve is steepening. Rates are rising on the longer end and through the intermediate area. In fact, we did see interest rates rise enough to where the returns did go negative. So it means the market values decline as interest rates rise. And we've been through this before. This is the same situation that we experienced when the Fed started to raise interest rates back in 2015 after we got through the credit crisis. So we start to experience some negative total returns. That's to be expected, not to be confused with negative yields. These are negative returns because of rising interest rates. So at the short end of the curve, in the very lower left-hand corner, this is, of course, interest rates are basically at zero. The Fed has been very concerned and very watching, and also has really notified most of the market that they would take care of the repo rate, which right now is pretty much at zero. The last Federal Reserve minutes indicate that the Federal Reserve would step in at some point here and put repo rates at 5 basis points. So the concern for negative yields certainly has dissipated as the Fed is really mandating that they're going to ensure that doesn't happen. But short-term rates are, of course, at very low rates, and the other parts of the yield curve is starting to see some increase that you could just see here just from December to April, how interest rates have moved up. And that's consistent with the growing economy as inflation now becomes more of an issue than we had last year, of course. I think some healthy inflation will be important for us to raise interest rates and to have an expanding economy. So this year, the rest of this year is going to be kind of that transitional year as interest rates rise. We will need to expect returns could continue to be negative as we go through this transitional period. But this is where the detailed cash flow analysis by the district and our help with them is to ensure that we have investments being purchased and not having to need them for liquidity purposes. But this is the transition that we'll have to go through, and we've done this before over the years. All right, so that's where the yield curve is, and the expectation is that the Fed will keep rates on the short end low at this point, at least until the end of next year. But as the economy gets better, that's subject to change. As we've been reporting to you on a regular basis, as we look through these various asset classes, these spread analysis really represents sort of what is the perceived market risk. As we looked at these at the end of last quarter, or excuse me, this same quarter of 2020, we saw that spreads were very, very high, and that was in response to the economic shutdown, and we saw a lot of spreads increase dramatically. They have come back to more normal levels. You'll see in the lower left-hand corner that corporate spreads have popped up again. That's really due to less demand for corporate securities. As you recall, throughout 2020, corporations, especially in the first and second quarters of 2020, issued a lot of corporate debt because the major theme was liquidity. And in order to have liquidity and you don't have revenue, the liquidity source is going to be a debt, whether it's letters of credits, lines of credits, or corporate bonds. So we saw a tremendous amount of issuance. The issuance is not quite the same level this particular quarter. So yields did pop up, and that's part of the result. We see some negative total return numbers because interest rates did go up, which in a long-term basis, that's really a good thing. And if you move on to the next slide. I think we've all been enjoying the results of the equity markets as 401ks are no longer 201ks, they're back to 401ks, and we see some good results. So if you could imagine where we were in March 2020, where the S&P was and where we are today. So kind of a V-shaped recovery, not quite a very steep V-shaped recovery, but certainly a respectable recovery in a short period of time, at least in the equity market. A complete contrast on the fixed income, especially on the short end of the yield curve, is where those rates are going to be at zero. But certainly on the equity market, we see quite an improvement. I think at this point, I'm going to have Scott Sweden. We've been monitoring, of course, all the corporate bond ratings. We've been very active in the review of corporate bonds and credit ratings all 2020, and we continue to do that. And I think Scott's got an update on some current holdings.
It always helps when you unmute. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Steve. I'll just touch on the downgrades that took place in the first quarter. Really, there is no surprise, especially within the energy sector. It was to be expected, the Biden administration, and they've been very transparent as far as transitioning away from fossil fuels. But as Steve said, our credit committee is very diligent. They meet frequently throughout the week. And whenever any downgrades do take place, I notify Leanne within 24 hours and provide details, provide our recommendation. And basically, the downgrades that took place in the first quarter, we're looking at ExxonMobil, Oracle, Chevron, Royal Dutch Shell, and National Rural Utilities. And all of these issuers still remain on our approved issuer list. Our current recommendation is a hold rating across the board. And any updates that will take place, I disseminate that to Leanne, again, within 24 hours. So the one thing I would just point out with these particular downgrades, first of all, the takeaway from your portfolio is you're well diversified across many different sectors. And just looking at these particular issues that were downgraded, your exposure to them is minimal, to say the least. Taking a look at Chevron, your exposure to the overall portfolio is 0.02%. Taking a look at National Rural Utilities, your overall exposure to the portfolio is 0.04%. And just keep in mind your investment policy allows up to a 5% limit per individual issuer. So we're significantly below even the maximum level that's allowed by your policy. And just to round things out, Oracle, your exposure there, 0.02%. And I did say Exxon, 0.02%. So just essentially across the board, your exposure is minimal. And that's really the takeaway there, unless you had anything else to offer there, Steve.
A question.
No,
what
yes,
part,
question.
I see those are small parts, but what part is the corporate aspect of our portfolio?
The overall corporate holdings, when you combine all assets of the district, it's about 1.48%.
So it's very
Right.
small.
Correct.
Yeah.
When you add all assets, right?
That's a good segue to pull up the quarterly report.
Exactly.
That's broken out. Is there anything in the front that you wanted to go over, Steve?
Yeah, Leanne, I think folks might find. Let me tell you what page number. If you would go to page 7 of that report.
Okay.
Page 7.
That's the
I'm a
TSA
person
checkpoint.
I'm a person who's been following the economy now for the last 30 some years and reporting on it. And I never really thought that I would be watching things like TSA, checkpoint travel numbers, or the U.S. Open Tables restaurant. I think everybody's familiar with Open Table. You make your reservations for restaurants, and requests for directions in Apple Maps. These are becoming very significant economic indicators because it does show how we are living and how we are functioning each day. So I never really thought that in the study of economics, this would be such an important set of tools to be watching on a regular basis. But it is the life we live, because everybody, of course, has a cell phone, and this data does get captured. So you do see the TSA numbers increasing. And you do see Open Table numbers increasing. So people are starting to go out and spend money, which is why the other numbers were improving. and you see the directions of maps, it's an interesting number in the sense that folks are walking for a change. So Americans haven't been good at exercising, but I think we are getting better at it. We're out walking, we're out looking for that information, and more folks are driving as opposed to any type of mass transit. So that's an interesting view of how our demographics has changed over the last year. And when you look at the New York Fed Weekly Economic Index, which is really a basket of information that's similar to the GDP, but not quite, that's greatly improved. So these are very good numbers moving in the right direction. Interesting how we have adapted our lives to sort of navigate through COVID-19. But we do see healthy signs of an economy coming back. And as I said earlier, as the number of vaccinated Americans improve, you'll see these numbers continue to increase here. All right, let's take a look at the portfolio, Leanne. If we go down to our discussion here, right there, we can go through the asset allocation chart. You'll notice this is the compliance page. And I don't know if, Scott, if you want to make any comments about the compliance page in the total review of the school district's assets.
Sure, Steve. Thank you. As Steve alluded to, this slide really serves two purposes. First of all, it shows if you're in compliance with your investment policy limits. And you can see in the bottom right column, you're in compliance across the board, given the various security types or sectors. And if we look at the upper portion of the slide, the bar chart, the gold portion of the bar indicates the maximum level that's permitted by your investment policy, given the various sectors. The blue shaded region is actually where you were allocated at the end of the first quarter. And really the takeaway here is, if you look at the difference between where you were allocated and the limits that are allowed by your investment policy, we're in a great situation. We have quite a bit of a buffer there, and it allows us to be very fluid, very flexible, and we're able to take advantage of any opportunities that arise in the marketplace. So it's just an ideal situation for both of us, you as the client and us as the investment manager. So it's really that slide in a nutshell. So
What are the intergovernmental funds? Is that the school fund?
That is the it's the Florida Palm. It used to be called FEITF, so that's the local government investment pool. And really,
okay.
when I do my analysis and check, we combine Florida Prime, which is the old SBA.
Yes.
We consider it an intergovernmental pool. We look at those two together.
Yeah.
For the 50% limit. So we look at both of them. We're in compliance. I mean, if you put the 7.8% in top of this, we'd still be in compliance. But most of our money right now, all the short-term money, is in pools and money market funds. And we try to keep the pools as close to the limit as possible because we get a higher return there. And then everything else in the short term is in money market funds.
Are they
right
transparent nowadays?
Yes. Yes, and when I show you the district's quarterly investment report,
Yeah.
we actually include all the data from those pools so that you can see those and look at them. They give us tons and tons of material. Our quarterly investment report, the district version, is now much bigger than what PFM gives us because we're including all that backup information for the public to see.
Okay, thank you, Lane. Let's just go over a few of the characteristics regarding the longer term portfolio. That'll be captured on page 20. You'll see the portfolio. As you recall, the long-term portfolio was increased, I believe it was last year, which was really at a good point here because it was important to push some of these assets a little bit longer simply because interest rates are so low. And I think over time, it'll make more sense if Leanne's cash flows work out to have more money invested out a little bit longer on the yield curve to pick up additional return. So that'll be sort of the strategy to look at the overnight investments and cash balances and make some decisions sort of strategically about where those assets need to be placed, because we feel like this yield curve is going to be in this position, at least from a 1 year and under for some time here into the future. So we want to take advantage of whatever additional spread we can pick up if it makes sense for the district. So that's sort of the transition we're going to go through. We've done this before. We've gone through this same yield curve during the credit crisis and as the Fed started to raise interest rates. So we were able to transition nicely, and we'll have to kind of repeat that this time as well. So you'll see the portfolio, the market value is above the par amount, and we have a duration that is about 7 3/4 of a year, so a little bit less than 2 years, and that has served the district well. As you'll see on the next page, from the return perspective, the 1 year return is quite substantially higher than the benchmark. For the quarter, both the benchmark had a negative return and the district portfolio had a slight 2 basis points. And that's simply because we did see corporate yield spreads increase. And that, of course, reduces the market value of the corporate holdings, and that reduces the total return. And again, we're going to be experiencing some quarters over the next year or two as interest rates rise. And certainly, as soon as the Fed starts to raise short-term rates, we'll experience more of that. But the main thing is that we have good cash flows. We know that we can hold securities till maturity and avoid any selling at losses. So again, we've been through this before. We know how to do it, and that we have detailed cash flow analysis. But for the year's return, quite a bit, about 100 basis points over the benchmark. And then, of course, you can see where we've been through. So quite a challenging year as we've been faced with all the credit situations, the low interest rates. We had lots of discussions throughout the year about negative interest rates. That appears to be a little bit less of a concern as we go into this year, as the Fed is watching that very carefully and has said they would actually raise overnight repo rates to 5 basis points to avoid that situation. So that's kind of where we are at this point, and I'll turn it back to Leanne or anybody who has any questions.
Okay, if it's okay, I want to open up the district's report. It has a lot of the same information, but it looks at the entire picture, including the short-term portfolio. So overall, it's about $1.4 billion, and only 5% is in securities, 85% is in money markets and local government investment pools, and we have 10% in bank balances, and that has to do with the schools and some other very short-term money. We're trying to limit the amount in bank balances and move more into money markets and government pools. But to Steve's point, one of the things that I'm working on is trying to develop, we've got very, very detailed cash flow projections for the general fund for basic operations. We know that inside and out. It's really solid. What we've not been able to get our arms around, or I haven't been able to, is the capital plan and the sales tax projects and the timing of when money goes out. So I recently received some cash flow projections from the facilities group, and we're going through those in conjunction with our capital plan and realigning some things. Some projects that I thought needed to be funded now, they're going to happen in July, so that's not a long way away, but that switches another year in the capital plan. So we're working with them to gather more data so that I can do a better job at projecting those cash flows and hopefully take some money and invest it a little longer out. And that gets back to Steve's point. But the piece that I was missing was the actual timing of when outflows, when cash will go out the door with all the big construction projects that are ongoing and the sales tax work. There's a lot of money there that I'm keeping very liquid because I just don't know when the bills are going to be paid. So I think the data I've received in the last 2 weeks is going to really help with that. So we may see, I may come back to you and do some shifts with the portfolio and move some more money back into the core. And it would be, our next meeting is in August, it'll be August 5th, and that's about the timing the capital plan is done. We'll have all that data available so we can look at it and see if we can make some shifts. And it may be something that we do only for the next 2 years, and then we shift it back, just depending on the timing of those projects.
Do we have a growing population? Have we found the lost kids?
I can let Mike talk about that.
The efforts are underway still. We're not going to really know until school resumes. but we're still projecting to be down about 6,000 students within our district-operated schools. And the legislature is about to expand the voucher programs, which could impact our enrollment negatively as families have more opportunities to take.
So that kind of is inverse to the construction program. What is the construction program, mostly renovation?
Right, you could see the general fund revenues go down at the same time the capital's going up. But we have, as soon as the budget is adopted and we know what those numbers are, we can very accurately reflect the cash flows for general fund. It's very predictable. It's all salaries, and we know how that gets paid out. So once we know what those numbers are, that'll also be happening in August. We should have updates on that. So I'll have the general fund locked down, and hopefully I'll have a better idea on capital. And it may be the capital fund, I mean, the general fund that's in the core portfolio, most of that is our contingency reserve, the board reserve that's set aside that we're not supposed to use, and that's set in policy. So we know what that is. Most of the general fund does come in and out every year. That's why we do the tax anticipation note in the fall. So it's that long-term portfolio that they're investing for us right now. So the question is, can we identify revenues that we can keep, maybe not as long as that core portfolio, but something intermediary? And so I'm going to be working on that over the next couple months as we're finalizing the capital plan, and we'll be able to bring that back to you in August. It may not be as long as 3 years. Maybe we have a section that we identify that this money can go out for 1 year and 2 year. And we can work with PFM on that. I can identify how long money can go out, and we can ladder investments based on that information.
Leanne, in the construction area, are you experiencing any slowdowns because of materials?
Not yet.
We're running into tremendous, 6-month delays and such. And the cost too. I mean, the costs are all.
Costs are going up. Costs are going up. Although it's interesting, in some places they're going down. Air conditioning, which I thought air conditioners would be going up, and our prices continually come down. I don't know if there's just a lot of competition, but those prices were coming down. The cost of wood and steel for rebar is going up. So we just awarded a contract. They're doing the guaranteed maximum price for 2 schools supposed to go to the board in May, and they're evaluating those, and they're coming in right within budget what we'd projected. So this question just came up with the Construction Oversight Review Committee, which is the only reason I can answer it because I was listening there. But some of the commodities went up and some went down, and at the net, they're within budget on both OO, which is the new high school, and O5C, which is the new elementary school in Boca Raton.
So in terms of, schools get retrofitted for COVID. What about school buses? I mean, I don't see how you can adapt a school bus over. You can't, right?
No, we can't, and we can't ensure, 6 feet of distance either. So we continue to require a mask, and we have seating charts on the bus. So in the event there was a case we could contract trace, right?
Yeah, there are certainly a lot of challenges that we're dealing with, and as kids come back next year, we're going to see as the vaccinations go up and as they develop vaccines that are available for students, that's going to make a big difference too. Okay, the other things I wanted to make sure I pointed out on this is this is the chart that I always include, and it shows how we're investing, and you can see the cash in the bank. That is this dark green, and you can see when we make the dramatic shift last year that we've reduced the amount of money in the bank, and the bright green area is money markets, and then the blues are the various local government investment pools, and then this brown area at the top, that's the piece that PFM is investing right now. That's the core portfolio. So the short term, and we did work with PFM when it got time to make the decisions in December on how to invest this short-term portfolio. And the best option for us at the time was money markets and pools. And I think that's still the case, but that's something we review on a regular basis to see what options there are. But we're working to put the money to work as best as we can. If we can identify a portion of it, like this piece that's down here, and that's one of the things Steve and I have talked about, this area that stays constant year over year, there's another bucket of money there, and maybe that, part of that could go into the core portfolio, or maybe we need to add another one that has not quite 1 to 3, maybe it's 1 to 2, and do another layer that can go out a little bit longer to get some additional yield. And then I want to show you the sales tax report. It's at the end. We're still doing really well. We're at 113% of projections. The numbers for January money was 85%. And I don't want anybody to worry about that. We've been at 85% every January since it started. I think it was just a flaw with the projections. That was the first money that came in when the sales tax started, and I was on the phone with the Department of Revenue to make sure they'd implemented it correctly. But it appears that between us and the county, we were both off for January results. So you'll see it spike back up, and I track this, and every January is the same way. So we're at about 113% of projections. My other big homework assignment that I'm working on right now is the governor did just sign into law a change that would require sales tax to be collected on online sales. So we're working on what that will do. We have a sales tax oversight committee meeting next Friday, and I'm trying to get that analysis done before that meeting. I'm not sure if I'll get it done, but I'm working with county staff. We want to make sure we're in sync on what we're projecting. So we're looking at that. That will increase sales tax revenues. We just don't know how much. And we probably won't know. We can project all day long and until it actually starts coming in, because nobody's tracked it before. So it's projections, and we'll be anxious to see what it looks like as it comes in. But sales tax is still on target. We had 2 months where it dropped down to 60% of projections, and it popped right back up again. So we're doing well. The money's coming in. We still have the line of credit. We have not increased it, and I thought we were going to need to, and we're not. So we're going to leave it at $80 million for the full 3 years. We've not drawn on it. I don't anticipate we will. We will need to come back to you with a replacement for that at some point. It's out for 3 years. So I think it runs until 2022, and I'll verify that. But we'll bring back, and David is on the line, I know. We're going to have to look at an option to do something else, because we'll still continue to need to have that for budgetary purposes. I don't see that we need the cash. And we talk about doing a sales tax revenue bond and actually bringing the cash in. And if we could meet the arbitrage spin down requirements on it, I'd consider doing that. But that's not really going to, I don't have enough comfort with the cash flows there. Hopefully I'll get that in August, and that'll be in time for that financing when we come back to you.
What's the status, Blair, on the referendum vote on sale? I think it was sales tax, right?
No, it's the 1 mil referendum for operations.
1 mil for operations.
So
that one was challenged, I know, and
yes,
successfully.
So just earlier this week, the 4th DCA denied our motion for rehearing on the case. So presumably we'll be appealing the 4th DCA's en banc ruling to the Florida Supreme Court.
Does that mean you have to retroactively now share the school's part with
the court
charter schools?
The court did not rule. The 4th did not rule on that. They remanded that issue back to the circuit court. So you know, the charter schools are, of course, demanding that it be retroactive, and we're arguing that it should not be.
Well, but going forward, you will split it up no matter what.
Well, I think I think the board is going to ask us to appeal to the Florida Supreme Court on the fact that the 4th en banc ruling was flat out wrong, and have the whole thing overturned.
Maybe you can give a little background here as far as that went. The referendum gave a vote that took out any allocation of that tax to the charter schools by vote. And the court actually amended the ballot to say it's supposed to go across the board.
They have, yeah, the 4th,
without having another election. I mean, it's pretty obvious it's a problem.
The 4th ruled that the language in the ballot question that said it was for non-district charter school, or did not include non-district charter schools, was severable from the rest of the language, and therefore the money could, because they've ruled that we should not have done that, the money could then be shared with all of the charter schools as well. And, obviously we take issue with the fact that the statutory language did not allow us to do what we did. We think we were perfectly within our rights to do that. We got, prior to finalizing that language, we got a opinion from outside counsel that was okay. The legislature changed the law that made it prospective that you could not do that anymore. Again, which we think is clearly indicative of the fact that it was legal prior to that, but the court ignored that change in the law in their ruling. And, I hate to say it, but I think
Didn't the court reverse itself to get to that position?
Say again?
Didn't the court reverse itself?
Yes,
to
the
get to that
original,
position?
the original panel was just the three-judge panel, and they ruled 2-1 in our favor. The judge who was in the minority apparently got members of the court who were not part of the panel to agree to en banc review, and then in the en banc review they reversed that. They reversed the court's original 2-1 decision in our favor. And that's what we asked for a rehearing on, which they denied. It's interesting in the court's denial that we got this week that there is one judge who wrote a dissent and said that the en banc ruling should be thrown out and they should go back to the 2-1 decision in our favor and leave it at that. But of course, he's in the minority.
So this is it's much politics on the court.
Huge politics. Huge
And
politics.
if I could just interject one thing also is, Mr. Burke, tell me if I'm wrong, but you have cautioned us and we have set aside the money in the event we have to be retroactive, right?
Well, yes, let me explain a little bit. So this was a 4-year referendum for the 1 mil operating levy. It generates over $200 million a year. We're about halfway through. So when we finish this school year, we'll be exactly halfway through. And to date, we've used all of the money to go to district schools to do exactly what we promised to voters. It started out that we had a $250,000 that we maintained, and that pays for over 750 fine arts and choice program teachers. And then when we went to 1 mil, we added some initiatives. A big one was to increase teacher pay, and where our teachers with 10 years of experience or more are getting $10,000 supplements to their pay. And then we added more school police officers and mental health professionals. So we've done all that. What's changing for next year's budget is that based on this court's reversal that Mr. Littlejohn spoke to, our general counsel's office has said, going forward, until we settle this with the courts, we need to start putting the potential charter school share of the revenue aside. So prospectively. So at least going into next school year, when we build the budget, we've got to set aside about $25 million that would normally go to our schools and place it in reserve, potentially for the charter schools. And again, that would just take care of it going forward. We do not have any funds set aside to go back for the last 2 years, which could be about another $45 million if that's the ultimate ruling. So it's a very large concern. I think Mr. Littlejohn did a nice job of explaining that we were within the law when this went to the voters in 2018. Like he said, the fact that the law was changed, we knew going into if we go back to the voters in 2022 that we'd have to include the charter schools. But now it looks like that could come sooner or even go retroactively, which will put a big strain on the budget.
As you might remember from our last meeting, we are getting ready to sell the COPS issue to finance the 2 new schools and remodel Delray Full Service. So we've had a series of calls to rating agencies. We've done due diligence calls with the underwriters that are involved in the deal. And after this last ruling, we doing another due diligence call with him on Monday. We pushed the deal back a week for several reasons. That wasn't the only reason, but we're staying on top of it and making sure. And Blair is on all my calls these days. He gets to listen to all the rating agencies and the underwriters when they have questions. So we're certainly working that as a team to make sure everyone has the information they need.
Okay, are we up now to the,
Yes, I think. Is everyone comfortable with the investment report? Okay, so I'm going to switch over to, this is the report, another market update, but this is on the debt side. So I think this cues up David Moore, who you haven't seen for a while. I think he's on today.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, since we were trying to be done at 9:15 and it's 9:20, we'll go quickly through this. I cannot do negative 5 minutes, but we'll be fun. I'll give you the short version introduction up front, and Leanne, just go on to page 4. I'll land there in a second. The bottom line is, in the last few years, it has already refinanced for savings the vast majority of the district debt. Now, as opportunities arise, we're picking up some of the pieces of existing costs with smaller financings and generally shorter financings, and picking up those refinancings. Specifically today, we're talking about the 2012 CCOP. There's about $40 million outstanding, and that all gets paid off on its own by 2029. So it's a pretty short financing. And the proposed refunding generates about $500,000 a year in savings. So again, it's not large like a lot of financings done in the past, but still an opportunity. On page 4 here, Dan has shown on the left-hand side, we're showing the yield curve at different points over the last year. We're showing the current, which is the solid white line, and then the other, the dashed line show last year. Interest rates had traded away over the last month or so, but actually improved in the last week, as you can see on the right-hand side. In the last week and even in aggregate for the last month, interest rates have dropped a few basis points, which is obviously helpful for financing. Leanne, go ahead and hop over to page 7. One thing to keep in mind, as many of you all remember, when the tax law was changed a few years ago, advance refundings were eliminated. So districts could no longer refinance bonds using tax-exempt bonds. You could no longer do that. You had to wait until it was called a current refunding, which is essentially done when the bonds are callable. You would have to do your finance for that. That didn't preclude some of the other things that we've used in the market for years to get around that prohibition. Things like just issuing taxable bonds. And that has been the most common tool issuers all over the nation have used in the last year or two in order to advance refund outstanding bonds. And the reason is that with interest rates at all-time lows, the difference between tax-exempt interest rates and taxable interest rates is very, very small. There's a couple of other ways you can accomplish an advance refunding that we'll talk about real quickly. One is a forward refunding, which really means you sign all the papers today, and then the financing closes next year when you would be within the window that's treated as the current refund. And the other that we're going to highlight is called a Cinderella bond, and it, as the name would suggest, it magically changes at some point in time. And what that means is you close the financing today. You're done. You've locked in interest rates, but they're taxable interest rates today. And when you get to the point in time where you would have been allowed to issue a tax-exempt refunding, it flipped to a preset, locked-in tax. So it's just a different way to warn the bottom line is banks math in the background to come up with the rate. And what we're proposing, and Leanne, I'm going to hop all the way over to the page and the very last page, instead of going through all the minutia scenario. So if you go to page 11, yeah, right there. What we're proposing is the district puts out a request for letters of interest and RFP to banks and the underwriting team and let them propose any of those refinancing structures that are the most efficient from their perspective. We'll review all of those, and then we would make a recommendation to staff, Leanne, as to which is the optimal approach for the district. There are differences between some of them. Specifically, if you do a taxable refinancing today, you're done. Locked in, everything's taken care of. There's no exposure to changes in tax law, in a year or so. And so when you look at this table we've got in here, you see all the way on the right-hand side, a Cinderella structure, and these are all estimates based on our internal math, would produce about 12.3% savings. A pure, just straightforward taxable refinancing would produce about 11.7%, and a tax-exempt forward would be 11.04%. This is close enough that because there are quirks in how a Cinderella structure works, we would recommend, since the savings is almost the same and there are no quirks in tax, I recommend to staff just do this. But until we get proposals in, we won't know the exact numbers. And so if you go to the last page, Leanne, we're recommending to get the RFP on the street as soon as possible, get the responses back in a couple of weeks, and then take the recommended financing to the board at the June meeting, and we would settle almost immediately after that. So you would lock in the terms shortly after.
So you can allow the proposals to come in any of those forms, the Cinderella bond or the taxable bond or the forward,
Right.
right?
We
And
allow.
then it'll come back to us, so we'll have to have a better feel for the differences. Paul can speak to Cinderella bonds.
Yeah, I think just for context. Oh, I'm sorry, was somebody asking a question?
No, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think just for context, the Solid Waste Authority has done a Cinderella structure a year or two ago. The county is just wrapping up a combination of taxable refundings, and it really depends on the particular structure, the duration of the deal, the time between now and the call date as to what structure ends up being the best. Our plan is that you would approve as a committee, you would approve this now, and you would be done with it. As far as an approval, you would be saying any of those structures are okay, and then whatever structure is optimal, we would go through that with staff and then take it to the board in June. At least that's how it's recommended. If the committee wants to see that table, that's for you all to decide, obviously.
In that case, I think we need to know more about the Cinderella bond.
Okay, and if you would like, I can schedule another finance committee meeting and have you all come back once we have the proposals in, if you'd like us to do that.
I don't know. If we're satisfied, I guess, with the explanation of it, would you like to do that? Meet again. Yeah, I would think so.
Since we've now gotten a new, people get left behind the curve, and my
This is
introduction to Cinderella bonds happened about 2 minutes ago, so.
Right,
here we
I
are.
think it's, now, Paul and the Solid Waste Authority and David Moore, and I was part of that. For that bond, over $350 million, it saved over $35 million, I guess. The Solid Waste Authority won the Southeast region out of the thousands and thousands of bonds, the bond buyers award for the best bond issue in the country, in the Southeast region, out of thousands and thousands of bonds. So it's now the hitch there is that we as bond counsel have to deliver an opinion on the delivery of the changeover. This oftentimes is called the crossover refunding, where the interest rate will change from a taxable rate to a tax-exempt rate. So that is subject, you're out whenever the call date is, to an opinion of bond counsel. The federal tax law hasn't changed. So that's the catch on the Cinderella bond, is it does require, just doesn't happen. It's supposed to just happen, but it requires an opinion of bond counsel that the tax exempt rate holds. Otherwise, it continues on the way it was done with Bank of America. The taxable rate will just continue on. The deal's done at a different level. But that takes more explanation probably than maybe not. And I think you're right. It's probably a good idea to come back, look at it again when you have the actual differences.
Okay, so I can work with, the calendar right now is the responses are due May 19th. I'll look at the calendar and send some options to you all for dates. So we come back and let you all review it to see the structure. Okay. Happy to do that. I'll work on that this afternoon to get expected dates and send them out to you all. See if I can find a Friday right after that and do another Friday morning.
The name Cinderella Bond is a great name for it, but it isn't. It
It adds a little Disney flair to
Yeah.
bond financing.
She turns into from
Cinderella.
Yeah, that name was not created by those of us who live up in Orlando. I'm not sure where the name came from.
With the Cinderella bond, it's issued as taxable, and then when you reach the call date, it switches to tax exempt.
Or midnight.
Yes, at midnight, and the
Yeah.
pumpkin slides across the road. Yeah,
so many bond counsel agrees. Otherwise, he's the bad guy.
Okay, so I'll work on some proposed dates and get that out to you today. You can check your calendars and see if it works. We just want to line these up. And David, one of the things I want to talk about is if we have board approval in June 23rd and we want to price right after that, that closing would happen, we'd have them splitting fiscal years. So you and I need to talk about that as well, just to make sure if there are any issues like with auditors that we've priced a transaction and we close on the other side of the fiscal year. I don't know that there is, but I like to get into the weeds with these things and make sure we're all good.
I don't know if that
Yeah.
should be a problem.
It probably isn't a problem. I just like to think through all those intricacies of timing. Year end, we get a lot of interesting things that happen at year end, just trying to make sure everything's falling the right side of June 30th. That's the magic. That's Cinderella's date too. It'd be interesting if we did a Cinderella bond and it happened between fiscal years. We'll see. So we'll get the RFP out as quickly as we can. I'll get the proposed dates and send that out to you this afternoon. Okay? And I think that is it. I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank the folks that are online as well for being here and participating in the meeting. I know that there's always a little bit of sound challenges. Hopefully you all could hear us well enough to understand the things we were saying.
Yeah, I don't know if that can be corrected. Hopefully it can be corrected.
We'll work on it some more and see if we can fix whatever the problem was, whatever the challenges are. I think the idea of having folks attend virtually, it can't be committee members, but other people's attending virtually. I think that's just the way we're going to go in the future. So we'll have to work that out and see if we can eliminate that issue. So we'll work on it for the next meeting. So I would say the next meeting's August 5th, but we will have an interim meeting to review the proposals. Okay.
Sounds good. With that, I believe we're adjourned.
We're adjourned.
Any other items? No. Okay, we're all adjourned.
Okay.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great day.
Thank you all on the phone.
Everybody online, thank you very much.
Just show you, when you get, our business is going well, things do change.